Now that the North American World Championship qualifier has concluded, I want to go ahead and take a look at the results. And to a lot of people's surprises, Orchest ended up winning the whole tournament, which, coming into this event, people were like, oh, Orchest is a good deck, it can top, but I don't see it winning over Maliss and Mitsurugi. However, I didn't think like that. If you recall in my first video, I said that Orchest, once it got its support in Battles of Legend Monsters Mayhem, that it could compete with Maliss, and sure enough, it did. Now, could I be objective and say that the Maliss player in the finals threw his match? Yes. However, like all good sports YouTubers and analysts, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to push agendas. And if you're not first, you're last, as the great Ricky Bobby once said. So, with Orchest winning over Maliss in a US-based event, we gotta start looking at Maliss as the biggest possible what if in the Yu-Gi-Oh meta. We're done with the 2020. It's time to put down the, what about Adamantipator, it released in COVID, so, it never got to, it was one of the best decks to never win an event. Now we gotta start looking at Maliss, because the way people were talking about Maliss before the North American World Championship qualifier, you would think that it was a tier 0 threat, it's hard for it to be stopped with hand traps, it's a bane on the game's existence with the support that it got in Alliance Insight. But yet again, it's not winning over here in the United States. So what's going on? Because if you look at a lot of other national tournaments, you'll see that it was winning a lot of the smaller events. But then when we get to an event with almost 3,000 people, it can't win. I keep making this reference to a specific sports team, but again, it goes in with like this Dallas Cowboys level of hype, but then it just doesn't produce. Oh, this combo can play through anything. This combo can play through these sets of hand traps. But then why can't it succeed? Why can't it make it over the hump? What's causing it to come over the hump? And so now with one last national event with the European World Championship qualifiers, it has one more chance to really make a name for itself as one of the greatest decks of all time if it can actually perform and make it over that hump, especially because we have Justice Hunters coming up in a few weeks at the beginning of August. And what Konami likes to do, if you've seen it a lot, is that they'll remove a lot of the old decks out of the meta via a ban list in order to sell the new set. And while I do think that the decks that are in the upcoming Justice Hunter set are good, with Yami, K9 boosting Vanquish Souls, competitive viability, and Draco Tail being another strong deck in that set, that Konami will just choose what they decided to do back in December when Crossover Breakers came out with Ryzeal and Maliss, and ban a lot of the old decks out of the meta. Was there a need to ban Original Sinful Spoils from the Snake Eyes deck when Maliss and Ryzeal came out? Not really, but they decided to do it anyway. So I would be cautious and start looking into the Justice Hunters format, especially for my more North American people, because I don't think Maliss has much time left on this earth, and then also, it's just not performing. It's just not performing at the level you would expect one of the greatest decks to perform at. When you talk about greatest decks, you have Tearlament, you have Zodiac, you have Teledad, a lot of decks that were able to perform at the highest level of play and win their respective tournaments. Because going back to my Tearlament example, when Kashtira got its full support in Photon Hypernova, everyone was expecting 50% Tear, 50% Kashtira. However, Tear was still able to outperform Kashtira, even though if you look at how Kashtira was built, it was built in a way to counter tier limits, even down to the lore that you can interpret from the pictures. Kashtira beats tier limits in the card lore, but performance-wise, Tier was still great. I'm not seeing that from Maliss. It'll be a very good deck that'll be remembered, but I don't see it being one of the all-time greats. So what I want you to take away from this video is maybe we should start curbing our expectations of decks and how good they'll be going into events. Because while Maliss looks unbeatable, a lot of the time the thing that's beating Maliss is either A, the players, or just sometimes unlucky hands. Because just like with any sports, any given tournament, anything can happen. So always go in with kind of a lower expectation of a deck, and sometimes you won't be disappointed by the results.